Welcome everyone to tonight's personal longevity webinar. Tonight's a personal story by Kath Johnson, ME CFIDS, My Story of Hope. Let me go to the next slide here. So here's tonight's agenda. Whoops, there it is. Tonight's agenda. I'm going to do a little introduction about what we're all about, then the presentation by Kath, which is going to be mainly audio. And then we'll have time for questions and answers. Everything we do in personal longevity is based on the 10 principles of personal longevity, which you see here. And these are all about helping people integrate spirit, mind, and body to optimize their long-term health, happiness, and longevity. And we have longevity coaching, we have workshops, our membership site, which I'm going to talk about, and several other things, all based on these principles. We also have a lot of books on longevity too. This is a snapshot of the personal longevity membership site. The full membership costs $10 a month, and for that you get access to 14 different areas, which include everything from a 900 document longevity blog, which is an archive which has been going for several years, ebooks, basic training on longevity, our basic training program, the community where you can communicate with other people or post things, even recipes of 4 of the longest lived cultures around the world. There's lots of stuff there. And the latest function we've added in this summer is the wellness program on aging and chronic illness, where we have specialists, Kath is one, who can work with you either in the initial free session or paid sessions about specific aging and chronic illness issues you might have. So it's a wonderful area on our main website, which you can see at the bottom, personal-longevity.com. You can go to the products drop down and learn more about our memberships. We also have a very basic membership, which is $19.95 one-time payment, where you get several great ebooks and packages on longevity, and you get a basic membership to just look at the longevity blog and the webinars and podcasts that we have. So we have a couple of different options. We really want to get people involved in this membership blog. Okay, next page. Talk a little bit about Kath. In fact, let me ask her to talk about herself, and Kath, if you would, and some of the bullets that are on here, okay?
Okay, thanks, Marty, and welcome everyone. It's 8:00 p.m. on the East Coast here, and I know Marty and other friends are out at 5:00 on the West Coast. And welcome to those of you who are listening from all around the world. Welcome to this longevity and wellness webinar. Again, my name is Kath Johnson.
Kath, if you could speak up a little bit so everybody can hear well.
Okay, maybe I'll turn my... I'm a longevity and wellness life coach. I do coaching for people with chronic illness, and specifically for an illness called ME/CFIDS, ME CFIDS, which stands for myalgic encephalomyelitis and chronic fatigue immune dysfunction syndrome. I've studied the brain for 35 years just because I'm fascinated with it. So I do a lot of brain research. I live in Delaware, and I was doing the outreach program for those with ME, CFIDS, and chronic illness in Delaware for a number of years. So people would call me on the phone, and I would listen and give them encouragement and hope. I attended the National Institutes of Health, that's the NIH, mini med school program, which was wonderful. I had 2-year training in anatomy and physiology. I was formerly a nationally certified massage therapist. I received my master's degree in OD, Masters of Science in Organization Development, from American University. I was a former secondary school teacher. I taught art, design, and photography. And I had my own business consulting business called Broadwater Consulting Group. So for the last 15 years or so, I've been doing my life coaching, and I've taken it now to work with people with chronic fatigue syndrome, which is what CFIDS is actually called, chronic fatigue syndrome.
Okay, thanks, Kath.
So
then before you go on, let me just mention then to remind everybody of our agenda. So now you're going to talk about tonight's topic, and then we're going to have plenty of time for questions and answers, and then I'm going to tell people how they can get access to your services if they'd like to. So with that,
great.
You're going to do most of the talking from here, Kath, and then we'll have that Q&A session. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Thanks, Marty. So I have two goals for tonight's webinar. One is that I want to reach out to those who suffer with
Your
this
line is
illness,
now muted.
to share with them my personal story and to offer empathy, understanding, sympathy, and most of all, a sense of hope, because there is hope. I'll be sharing some of the coping mechanisms that I used and some of the wisdom that I gained that helped me in my healing. And my second goal is to teach others, those of you who are non-sufferers, more about the illness and how devastating it can be to live with this in one's life. It's a disease that can take away so very, very much of life. So in my coaching with this population of people, I help people come to terms with this very difficult illness. Having had this disease myself and recovering from it, I bring years of research and personal experience to my work with those who are fighting to recover from this devastating situation. So in my coaching, I provide education, coping strategies, support, encouragement, hope, and a plan for wellness for the arduous journey through this illness. So let's talk about what is ME/CFIDS. It's myalgic encephalomyelitis. I'm going to turn. And for tonight's purposes, I'm just going to call it ME instead of saying that whole mouthful. So it's the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, has referred to ME as being as severe as end-stage cancer, as having AIDS, end-stage AIDS, as severe as multiple sclerosis, as end-stage renal failure, kidney disease, lupus, congestive heart failure, and as debilitating as having heavy chemotherapy. So it's a lot. ME is a neuroendocrine systemic disease, which means it affects all parts of the body. It affects many organs, glands, cells, muscles, whatever. It can create havoc with the digestive system, with the immune system, with the brain. It can cause adrenal gland burnout, joint pain, muscle pain, extreme weakness of the legs, of the limbs, all the limbs, so badly so that one can't walk. It can have strange effects, like it can dull your sense of taste. It reverses cortisol and melatonin cycles, causing little to no sleep, and many more sometimes strange symptoms. How does it affect people? Well, a lot of people who get this are bedbound for a long time, many years in some cases. And while I'm talking about this, there is a continuum of people who have a mild case of it, and then those who suffer for years and years. So keep that in mind as I'm talking. So a lot of people start out bedbound for a while. Some stay bedbound for a long time. And others, after being bedbound for a while, are housebound for a number of years. Can't really drive or go out or do anything. They're just too fatigued, too confused, too emotionally wrought. It affects a person in so many ways. Physically, because you can't walk very much or do anything. Emotionally, because when you have it, you're frightened and you're unsure. You may be angry and you're certainly sad. You've lost the person that you were. It affects people mentally because you have a sense of confusion. Things aren't clear in your mind anymore. Neurologically, financially, it affects people financially because most people don't work who have this. They have to quit their job. And it's also expensive to get care for this. Cognitively, because some people lose the ability to read or write or do math. It affects your life socially because when you're bedbound, it's pretty hard to have a social life. Spiritually, and in your work and career. And also your self-esteem can just take a real dive because you're not who you used to be. You used to think of yourself as being a high-functioning person, and then all of a sudden, within a day sometimes, you're reduced to this person who needs care, who can't think, who can't read, who has lost the ability to walk and work and everything. So it's a real hit on people's self-esteem. So it's like everything that you have ever held dear about yourself is taken away from you, including your beliefs that you're a healthy person and you're functional and things, and then all of a sudden you're not. It takes away who you used to be, takes away some of your friendships, takes away money in your bank. It can take away your job and your desire, your motivation, and much, much more. This horrible and very severe disease is referred to around the world as myalgic encephalomyelitis, ME. So when people in the United States started contracting it, this was about 30 or more years ago, Time magazine ran a story about it about 30 years ago and called it the yuppie flu. You might remember that. And then called it chronic fatigue syndrome. Ha! Chronic fatigue syndrome. That's such a misnomer. It's incredible. It's not just about fatigue. And when you have this, people will come up to you and say, chronic fatigue syndrome. Oh, I must have that. I'm always tired. And which is just a real blow, to your heart and soul when you hear something like that, when you're struggling so significantly. It'd be kind of like if you went up to a paralyzed person and you said to them, oh yeah, I understand what it must be like to be paralyzed. My legs, my legs are always tired and they get stiff and tired. So finally in America, we're starting to catch on with the rest of the world and calling it myalgic encephalomyelitis. So when I received my diagnosis, my doctors told me there was nothing they could do for me. I went to a number of doctors and they said, we don't really know what this is. You're just going to have to go home and learn to live with this. When I went to my doctor, she finally diagnosed me with chronic fatigue syndrome, myalgic encephalomyelitis, and told me there was nothing I could do. This would probably last a lifetime. There was no cure for it. And the only thing I could do was go home and just try to learn to live with it. So, so that brings me to my story of healing. So let me first say I had always been a very active person and athletic. I was a competitive swimmer. I skied. I played field hockey, tennis. I ice skated. I did a lot of canoeing. I backpacked in Canada. And almost every day I power walked 5 miles a day. Then one day in 1991, I woke up with a really bad case of flu. High fever, exhaustion, weakness. I could only crawl to the bathroom, and that seemed to take a long, long time. I knew something was wrong, but I thought it was just the flu, and I thought it would get better, like flus do after several days. So I couldn't really get out of the bed. So my 8-year-old son, then, I was raising him as a single mom, he would bring me a glass of water or some tea and some toast. But I didn't have any hunger anyway, so I didn't eat it. But that was nice of him to do that. So I waited, hoping this would get better, and it never did. So I finally called my mother, who lived several hours away, and she came over. When she walked in and she saw me, she knew that I was extremely sick. This was something different. And so she talked me into making an appointment with my doctor immediately. Of course, I still thought I just had the flu and I was going to get better. But she talked me into making an appointment. So then she helped me, well, she almost carried me to the car to go to see my doctor. My doctor did tests for every disease under the sun. And did account for viral titers, which are a measure to tell you how, if you have a virus in you. And it came back that my titers were higher than any she'd ever seen before. So she diagnosed me with CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome, told me to go home and try to live with it. What apparently happened to me, and some people have different ways of getting into this illness. But what happened to me is that I had a virus that tore through my brain, and it injured or destroyed, I'm not even sure which now anymore, the control centers of my body. And it affected all my endocrine glands, my adrenal glands, my thyroid, my ovaries, my pituitary gland, all the adrenal glands. And it was almost like I had a stroke because I lost the ability to read, and I could barely walk. I couldn't think really or talk much, but it wasn't a stroke. It was a big viral hit. So there I was at home. During that time, I lost the ability to read or write. Words just were meaningless. I could say the word to you, but I had no idea what it meant. So I couldn't read, and watching TV made no sense to me at all. It was just gibberish. And I would just get very angry because I had nothing to entertain myself while I was going through this. It was quite an awful thing. I just couldn't process language. So for a year, there I was, lying in bed, unable to read or watch TV or entertain myself in any way, just staring at the ceiling. I called it then, it was like being in an awake coma. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I was like frightened because I had the eyes had lost the color of the pigment, so they were just sort of white and glassy, and I had a deep pallor. It was quite frightening. And I couldn't sleep at all, not 1 minute. I sat upright all night long in sheer agony, watching every single minute pass on that clock. Then when I woke up, well, I can't say I woke up because I was awake the whole time. I never went to sleep. But during the day, I could rest I seemed to be able to settle down to be able to rest for an hour or two, and that helped. So this went on for a full year. Obviously, I couldn't work or drive or do anything. Then I found a new doctor. His name was Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum, and I want to say that name for anybody with this illness who's listening. He is an expert on ME, myalgic encephalomyelitis, and he actually lived in Annapolis, where I lived then. So I went to him, and one of the first things he did was put me on a very high dose of Ambien, which is a sleep medication. And even with that high dose, I could only get 1 or 2 hours a night of sleep. But it was something. And that's when things started started to gain a little traction there. So now Dr. T, as we call him, is an international expert on ME CFIDS, working with people from all over the world. So since regular medicine said they had no hope for me and they didn't know what to do and they couldn't do anything for me, I started going to all kinds of alternative practitioners, anybody I could find. I took a lot of supplements for almost every organ and gland in my body. I received acupuncture. I had a lot of massage therapy, which was really a lifesaver. It was one of the best things I've done to recover. I did light therapy. I underwent chelation therapy, which is a process that takes toxic metals and substances out of your body. I had my mercury fillings replaced. I went to energy healers, Rolfers, you name it. I took Chinese herbs. I used to cook my little pot of herbs outside on the front porch because they smelled so badly. But after I took them for a long time, they were one of the things that really helped me recover as well. They were really effective in helping me with some of my symptoms. And after a while, because they were helping me, I even started to I started to not mind the taste. I really wanted to drink them because I knew they were doing my body so good. I went to a nutritionist weekly to learn all about nutrition and to learn about all kinds of new foods that I'd never heard of before, like teff and quinoa and spelt and all kinds of things, and to learn how to enjoy cooking with those kinds of things. I tried kinesiology. I took mud baths. That was fun. And drank and swallowed charcoal tablets. This was all to try to get the toxic minerals and mercury and things out of my body. I wrapped up in sheets and sweated. I did far infrared saunas. I would do just about anything to get better. If someone suggested I eat pig snouts, I probably would have done that. I had a lot of symptoms because, as a lot of people do with this illness, because it's systemic and it affects many, many different parts of the body all at once. So I'll go through some of my my symptoms. My temperature was out of whack. This was in the summer that I got this, and it was 95 degrees out, 100 degrees, and I had to wear long johns and wool socks and sweaters and coats and get into the bed with quilts and quilts over me. It was my temperature thing went wacko inside. And I slept in my clothes when I was bedbound for that year. I slept in my clothes because I was just too exhausted to change my clothes, to lift my foot, to put it outside, to put it inside a pair of pants. It was too much. I was too weak. I bathed. I took a bath only once or twice a month because it was just too fatiguing. And anyway, I was just lying in bed, so I wasn't getting all that dirty anyway. My head filled with fluid. And when I knocked on it, you know how when you knock on a watermelon to see if it's ripe, you hear this thunk, thunk, thunk. And I'd knock on my head with my hand, and I'd hear this thunk, thunk, thunk. And I could feel the fluid sloshing around from one side of my head to the other. I could actually feel it. So when I started to drive again, as I would go up an exit ramp off of a highway, my ears would be so painful. They would start to be extremely painful. It was like I was in an airplane 30,000 feet up from all the fluid in my brain and in my head. For dreams, I didn't have dreams for a number of years. I would have these blobs of pulsing colors coming at me, whoosh, 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 in the space where a dream would be. So just, it was, there was no storyline to the dream. There were no people in it. It was just these woo, woo, woo. Something neurological, I'm sure. But it was frightening. It was terrifying. I developed sensitivities to a lot of foods and lost a lot of weight, which I didn't need to lose, and I became very, very thin. My short-term memory was gone. It was shot. I couldn't remember the beginning. If I talked, I couldn't remember the beginning of a sentence by the time I reached the end of the sentence. And if somebody was talking to me, after the first 3 words they said, I forgot them. I had no idea what anyone was talking about. And then when I started to drive, I would get lost in my own neighborhood. I didn't remember where I was. I was confused. I'd set out to go someplace, and I'd get to a red light, and I'd look up and I'd say, where am I? What am I doing here? Why am I out here? Where am I going? Where am I supposed to go? Do I turn right or left? And I would just break down crying. It was just a horrible feeling. It was frightening. I had chronic swollen glands all over the place where I didn't think I even had any glands. And ordinary smells, odors, and sounds were excruciating to me. I was so sensitive. I wore earplugs most of the time because even the hum of the refrigerator or a cricket outside would sound like, it was just awful. It was very, very painful. Almost became unbearable. Actually, this is called hyperacusis. I was too weak and fatigued to talk, to converse on the phone. I was isolated in my house for several years. Thank God my son, my 8 and then 9 and 10-year-old son, was a very responsible kid, and he was one of those kids who was born 40 years old. And so he was able to take care of himself while I took care of myself. All in all, it was a really, really difficult time. And I thought that I would never get better. And my doctors corroborated that and told me I'd never get better. So from all the losses that I faced, a secondary depression set in. It wasn't clinical depression by itself. It was a depression caused by the loss of so much of the life that you have known before. I had no hope of recovery. I faced what is known as maybe you've heard it, dark night of the soul. I was in a very deep, deep, dark, and frightening cavern. And I thought I had no way out. I'd lost any faith that I had. I was morose, gloomy, and in deep, deep despair and in deep trouble. At night, I would pray to God, the God that I no longer believed in, and ask to be taken in the night. I didn't want to wake up. I didn't want to live. I didn't want to see the next morning or wake up again. I think it was the thought that I had my son there that actually kept me holding on by a thread. And I mean by a thread, I was just holding on by my fingernails. So I started wondering, well, how did I get here? How did this happen? How did I get this strange, awful illness? And looking back, I realized I had had a lot of exposure to toxic chemicals in my life. I lived on a farm where we used fertilizers and pesticides. Then I was an artist, and I used art materials. I became an art teacher, again using solvents and paints and photographic chemicals in the dark room and things. So I had a pretty heavy chemical load. Later, after college and doing some other things, well, I was a teacher, yes, an art teacher. I worked for a Sometimes I still struggle for the words, but that's okay. I worked for a garden supply center, a nursery and garden supply, and again was around pesticides and fungicides and those kinds of things. So I really, had a lot of that. I was also a really, really hard worker. I pushed myself all the time since I was a kid. I pushed. I felt because I was a girl and then a woman that I had to push harder than my brothers. And I had to push to excel and exceed and be the best that I could be. I worked hard, I worked long. So I exhausted myself. I never knew the thought of the concept of pacing oneself. I just worked full tilt boogie, as they say. Never resting, well, rarely. Just working. I was a workaholic. Because I felt I had to find worth, have people think that I was worthy in this world. So all of those things, I think, pushed me to the point of exhaustion, adrenal burnout. I was in a very difficult marriage. I was raising stepkids and then raising our own son, all the while working full time. And again, felt I had to work twice as hard to prove my worth. So what are some other reasons that people might get this disease? Stress is a big one. Chronic stress is really a big one for this illness and actually for most chronic illnesses. A genetic predisposition. Some people are predisposed to get an illness like this. A toxic load, a heavy chemical toxic load, poor nutrition, and not only poor nutrition in your home, but in the ground and the soil that we have, which is now so much more depleted than it was even 50 years ago, depleted of minerals that we need. So the food that we are getting isn't as nutritious as it was 50 years ago or before that. And another thing that I think brings a lot of people to this is busyness, staying too busy, being high achievers, being always busy, filling your day, just constantly being busy. So, so let's skip to 25
Your line
years
is now
later,
unmuted.
And I am healthier than I've ever been. I go to the gym now 3 times a week. I bicycle, I kayak, I take care of my acre of yard by myself, and I'm intensely happy, immensely happy. I have recovered, and I've recovered more than I've ever lost, in a sense. As I healed, I went back to school, and I became a massage therapist, nationally certified. Then I went back to school again at 50 years old, and I earned my master's degree in OD, which tells you that I figured out I learned how to read again, obviously, to do that. And and then became a life coach, which I've been doing for the past 15 years or so. And now I live a balanced life. I don't push anymore. I rest. I pace myself. I do what I need to do, but I put breaks in between. I pace myself. I never overdo. If I overdo, then I can get kind of snapped back into 2 days of pretty bad fatigue. But I don't let that happen anymore because I'm living a balanced, sane life. So the life I live now is one I choose to live. I choose to live like this. It's not that this disease has made me live like this. well, it did at first, but now I choose to do this because it's the only sane way to live. I get enough sleep. I go to bed. I try to go to bed early when it's dark and wake up with the sun. I try to live in rhythm, in rhythm with nature in a lot of ways. I don't push myself to extremes anymore. I don't overdo. And I lost the desire to worry, and I don't worry anymore. Because through this, it's like if you can face this when everything is taken away from you, there's nothing to worry about anymore. Everything is just small jump change. So I just lost the ability to worry, which is wonderful. I eat a healthy diet. I live, a life of balance and moderation. Once in a while, I'll do a little bit of in moderation, but it's not much. Mostly it's moderation. And sometimes now I look back and I think that there were a lot of gifts in my illness that I certainly didn't see then. But I met a lot of wonderful practitioners and healing people. I learned after I was able to read again. I read so many books. I had the time to do it because I wasn't going anywhere. Read so many books. I went to so many workshops and things about illness and about positive thinking. I learned about cognitive behavioral therapy, and I changed the way I thought. There's no room in my life for any negative thoughts anymore. I've learned how to reframe negative thoughts into positive thoughts, and that has a large effect on one's health. And I sleep well now. I kind of feel like I've been reborn, but better now than I was before. I see things now. I take time to see things that I never saw before. I think thoughts that I never thought before. After everything was taken from me, but now all has been restored to me tenfold. So now I take great pleasure and sustenance in helping others who are suffering with this disease.
Okay, Kath, we should wrap it up in a few minutes. We should wrap it up in a few minutes so there's time for question and answer.
I'm ending. So many people were there for me on my journey, in my healing journey. They were my healing team. So now I want to give back to the world and to pass it forward and to be there for support and hope and listening to others who are dealing with ME or any other chronic illness. So that is my story. I hope you've enjoyed it this evening. I've enjoyed talking with you about that. And now it's back to Marty.
Thank you, Kath. That's a wonderful personal story of kind of personal resurrection. I thank you for that. Even though there's a lot of detail, it's really wonderful to hear what somebody has done with their life and changing that. So very briefly before, not Layla, that was the last presentation, but very briefly before we get to the question and answer session, I want to tell you how you can use Kath's services on our website. So you would go to our website, personal-longevity.com, join as a full personal longevity subscription member for $10 a month. You would get access to the members homepage on the website and select the aging and chronic illness section. It's the big wellness graphic. Then you can choose a free or paid session with Kath. When you look at the choices for the drop downs, there's also a lot of detailed bios of her and the other people, and set the appointment time and schedule to pay it online. So we're trying to give the information about our consultants here and what they've gone through, what they've learned, and how they can help you on specific aging and chronic illness issues. And Kath has talked a lot about her experience and why it's relevant to this. So I'll leave this slide up here and open it up to questions. Let me promote a couple of people here who can ask questions. That'll take me a second here. Let's see. Hold on. Well, while I'm bringing a couple people into the verbal section, let me ask you a question to answer, Kath, and that is,
Mm-hmm.
what do you do with people who've had a similar problem? What exactly type of process do you have them work through to help themselves get out of this?
Well, I think I talked about the things that helped me. It's a multifactorial way of looking at an illness. There's not a pill that goes away, or there's not one thing. It's a bunch of things done synergistically that little steps. I help people take little steps to help with their mood, with their mind, help with their diet, with their nutrition. Things like we take little steps, and I kind of walk hand in hand with them as we take this and we're going to develop a plan sort of to include a lot of these things into one plan. Does that make sense?
Sure.